Hello everyone, welcome to GE2 Purposive Communication. And in this video, this is the continuation of the last video that I presented to you about chapter 4, which is the varieties and registers of spoken and written language. So let's just have a sort of recap before jumping into the discussion of this part 2. So in our previous video, we've talked about language register, and we've learned about 3 language registers that have been identified as the most common in terms of language study. So we have formal, informal, and neutral. So this time, in this video, we will talk about the part 2. And the part 2 of this video talks about the varieties of language. So without any further ado, let's discuss this topic. So anyhow, the different kinds of English language, there are different kinds of English language around the world. Maybe perhaps you would say, how come that there are different kinds of English, considering we are just using one English, even if we are in different countries? Well, the different kinds of English language used around the world led to the varieties of the use of English. Yes, as our topic talks for it, there are varieties of language, and we will focus our discussion on the English language because English, as we all know, is our universal language, and that's actually the point of this video, to study more about English language. So I will repeat, the different kinds of English language used around the world led to the varieties in the use of English. And that's what we are going to discuss this time. But however, you will ask, how come that there are different kinds of English around the world, considering we only have one English in mind, the one that we are using in our daily conversation, the one that we are using inside the classroom? Well, the answer for the question is because of the historical, okay? Because of historical entity, because of the historical background of language, there are what we call varieties of language, particularly on the English one. English was actually based from history, came from England. And if you could remember, people living in England are called English. And they are the one who first used the English language. And take note, it is their native language for more than 1,000 years. However, eventually the use of English spread in many parts of the globe. Again, it is spread. So why is it spreads out? It spreads out in many parts of the globe because of migration, employment, and economic reasons. So very common, use of English language were being used in Canada, USA, and Australia. So it was spread out from England to these 3 different countries because of migration. There are a lot of people who migrate during that time based from history, and they're also employment. So there are people from England who was being employed in these 3 countries, and economic reasons. Perhaps we are very much familiar about the history of these 3 countries, Canada, USA, and Australia. And perhaps we can say that they are really established in terms of economic. So since language, as we all know, is dynamic, ibig sabihin, nagbabago. So, and we all know that language is culturally bound. So in different cultures, we have different approach on language. And that's the reason why we were going to talk about the varieties of language. The difference in culture eventually resulted in changes in the original English language. So I will just to have a recap. Originally, English was natively spoken in England. That's the reason why people in England are called English. And take note, they used English as their native language for more than 1,000 years. And because of migration and employment and what we call economic reasons, it was being spread out to different parts of the world, particularly on Canada, USA, and Australia. So again, there are at least 3 main varieties. Based from the history, there are 3 main varieties of English. We have British English, American English, and Australian English. Again, this is based from history. However, variety and even sub-varieties had been noted in their countries. So even if there are what we call British English, even if we have the American English and Australian English, still, in each particular country, they also have the so-called varieties, even sub-varieties. Let's just have an example in America. Basically, America is actually a large country. And in different places, in different states of it, they have their different English. In short, they have their different accent. Well, that's the reason why, as being mentioned, even if these 3 countries who uses English also have their own varieties of English. So there are maybe varieties in spelling. For instance, color in America is color with C-O-L-O-U-R in British English. So that's one aspect that English has really varieties in different culture in different places. So the most prevalent variety of English is what we call American and British. This is very common, and we all know about this American and British English. So varieties had been observed in grammar. We all know that American English has its own grammar, while on the other hand, British English has its own grammar as well. For instance, for British speakers, they would say, "Have you eaten all those fruits?" While for Americans, they would say, "Did you eat all those fruits?" This is due to the fact that British English at times use the present perfect tense of the verb. So since these 2 Englishes are most prevalent variety of English, they also have varieties in grammar. And based on example, even in grammar, take note, they are using one English, but they have varieties on how they used the English language in particular. So again, as being mentioned, English for British, they are using the perfect tense of the verb. So if you can notice, we have you eaten? So have plus the past participle form of the verb, that's the reason why it was being called perfect tense of the verb. Whereas American, they use the simple past tense. Did you eat all the fruits? So more examples could be seen as we go along, or if you have your electronic book of this subject, you can have a lot of examples of it. So that is present perfect and simple past tense. Now, let's proceed to the tag questions. Basically, you are familiar with tag questions. So earlier, we talked about varieties of grammar. As we go along, we also encounter the so-called tag question, and I will not discuss it any further because you already encountered this during your previous English subjects. So for tag questions, the following varieties were also observed between British and American English. Again, I will just take a note that we will focus on the very common or most prevalent English, the British and the American, okay? So in British English, in terms of tag question, they used this type of sentence. I'll upload these pictures in my Facebook. Will I? Try to consider the structure of the sentence in British English? I'll upload this picture in my Facebook. Will I? While in the American English, they have this kind of structure in terms of tag question. I'll upload these pictures in my Facebook, right? So still, variety in English was noted in this tag question. So they have different in terms of the last one. Will I and the word right? But still, they have in common. They are still have one meaning. It's just that they still they consider varieties of the usage of English. Now, after varieties of grammar, varieties of tag question, we will proceed to the next, varieties and preposition. Varieties in English was noted in the use of preposition. For instance, the British would say, the time is 15 minutes past 5. So here in the Philippines, we are not using that. If somebody would ask you, what time is it? You will just say 5:15. But in British, they call it, the time is 15 minutes past 5. However, in America, they would say the time is 15 minutes after 5. So there are differences in terms of the preposition that was being used, the past and the after. But still, they are using the same meaning. So after the grammar, tag question, and what we call preposition, there are also varieties in adverbs. So I will not discuss any further about adverbs because you are familiar that adverb is one of the part of speech. So for adverbs, the following varieties in informal speech between British and American English had been noted. So we have here, in British, they call it, Tagaytay was real cold last February. While in America, they consider it, Tagaytay was really cold last February. So basically, if we will just study the sentence itself, there are two-way different, because in America, they use it as really cold. While in British, they call it real cold. But if we were going to go back to the history of English, especially on the pronunciation, British has this different accent in American. Because British, they usually cut words, like, for example, I know you are familiar with Harry Potter. So they are using the British English. They tried to cut every word, like, for example, mirror. It sounds like mirror, but the word is mirror. Same in America, but in America, they not pronounce it as mirror, but they pronounce it as mirror, okay? So from that scenario, there was really varieties in terms of adverb. The adverb here is the word real and really. So in American English, they tend to use the word adverb using the ly ending. So that's the reason why in the given example, Tagaytay was really cold last February. So they have that really ly as an indication that this is an adverb is really used in American English. So apart from this variety, we also have the so-called varieties in meaning. But before going to details about it, for vocabulary, there are what we call varieties of English that could be seen mainly between American English and British English, the two most prevalent varieties of English. So we have the first one is the meaning. So in some instances, variety between British and American English were seen, such as and the use of the word cab for Americans, while the British uses the word taxi. Okay, so they use the word taxi. So although both refer to only one and the same thing. So again, in vocabulary, particularly on the meaning, they totally differ with each other, because in America they use the word cab, while on the British they use the word taxi. However, noted were differences in meaning, and the use of the word quiet is used as intensifier. Intensifier means there is an intensity. Like, for example, he was upset a while ago, and that was all right. But now he's quite upset, so we have to leave. In British English, quiet is used to lessen the intensity of the term. Let's have an example. He was upset a while ago, so I was thinking of leaving. Now, he's still quite upset, so I think it's all right to stay. So try to consider the difference between these two sentences. So basically, they have different, in terms of meaning, using the word quiet. So for further information and for further examples, there are differences in variety, or examples on the differences in variety in the meaning of words between British and American English. You can search or look for it in your electronic book if you have a copy, or I will just provide it on the link description box below. Okay? So that's it for the varieties of English. So we are done with our discussion. And before we will going to end this video, let's just have a sort of recap about the varieties of English. So again, this video talks about varieties of language, and the language that we are using is the English language. So different kinds of English language around the world. And that is the main reason why there is different kinds, or there are different kinds of English, because of history. So based from history, it was all started in England, that England uses English as their native language for more than 1,000 years. And because of migration, employment, and economic reasons, English was spread out to different parts of the world, particularly on Canada, USA, and Australia. So because of that, there are 3 classified varieties of English: British, American, Australian. But the most prevalent variety of English is the American and British. And actually, our English here in the Philippines are using both American and English. And perhaps some of the people who are using English, particularly on the speaking aspect, they are actually using both American and British. So there are words that was being used in American, and there are also words that was being pronounced in British. So part of this variety of English, we have the variety of grammar. We also have the variety of tag questions, varieties in prepositions, varieties in adverbs. And we also have the varieties in meanings as part of what we call varieties of vocabulary. So that's it. And we'll see for the next video about the next topic, which is the chapter 5. And the chapter 5 talks about the evaluation, or how to evaluate an images or a picture, or what we call messages. We will going to identify that in our next video.